Man, I'm not doing that today. I'm not teaching math. I'm not dressed. I'm on what? I'm on camera. Oh, hey, this is your math professor looking like your gym professor. I apologize for the way I'm dressed, but they just kind of thrust me in here. But anyways, they wanted me to do a session for you guys to teach you guys about word problems and the quadratic formula. So we're going to look at some applications of the quadratic formula using word problems. I know your favorite subject, right? I know. It's kind of my favorite thing to do too, pretty much. A lot of people fail word problems, but don't worry, I'll get you through it. Come on. Let's read this word problems and let's see how it works out. It says here, the length of a bedroom is 3 feet longer than it is wide and has an area of 154 square feet. Find the dimensions of the room. So we're dealing with the length of a bedroom, and they said that length is 3 feet longer than it is wide, and they want us to find the area. I'm sorry, they gave us the area and they want us to find the dimensions of the room. Well, when I have a word problem like this, one of the approach that I kind of take to solving this type of word problem is I always want to read and reread the problem until I identify the thing that I know least information about, because that's where you're going to start with letting X represent that particular thing. So you read it and find out what is the thing more information is given about, what is the thing least information is given about. So when I read this, it says the length of a, first of all, we're dealing with the length and the width of this room. And it says the length of a bedroom is 3 feet longer than it is wide. So when you read that first sentence, which one of those items more information is given about, which one of those items least information is given about? Well, you would guess correctly if you said that least information is given about the width. All that 3 feet longer stuff, that's being said about the length. So the least information is given about the width. That's where you want to start, and X will represent the thing you know least about. So let X, let the width be represented by X. This is how you always want to start. Let X represent something, and that X will represent the thing you know least about. So now once you have an expression for your width, now you could read the problem and interpret your length and get an expression for that as well. So